Greetings, everyone. Here are the latest analyses of today's important developments. The Belarus border is ablaze, and Lukashenko has ordered preparations for war. Amid the rapid deployment of S-400 missile systems and tactical nuclear weapons near Ukraine, NATO's eastern flank is facing an unprecedented life-and-death crisis in history. Will the layered fortifications and 1,000-kilometer shield hold? The world is about to see a major confrontation. A NATO country is pushing the world into a terrifying arms race. They possess a fleet of super tanks surpassing even the combined forces of the UK, France, and Germany by pouring up to 5% of their GDP into the defense budget and issuing orders to purchase more than 1,100 advanced battle tanks along with nuclear-capable F-35 fighter jets. Poland is rising strongly to become a formidable armored force right on Russia's doorstep. Is this crazy military gamble the ultimate defensive card to protect the continent? The Night Fleet strikes, making the Baltic Sea the center of Russia's strategic battle as the tide shifts beneath the ocean. Russia's unidentified ghost ships quietly cut undersea internet cables, disrupting connections deep underwater. Meanwhile, in the south, Turkey wields its supreme power, tightly controlling the Black Sea Fleet with new-generation aerial ghosts and advanced drones. What classic secrets lie behind Putin's Maskirovka doctrine? Here are the details and analysis. The Belarus border is ablaze. Poland is ready for war to crush Russia. Ladies and gentlemen, on the turbulent geopolitical chessboard, a fiery confrontation has quietly taken shape along the entire strategic border, stretching from the icy Baltic Sea down to the Black Sea. No longer confined to the scope of a local conflict, all eyes of military analysts are now focused on a massive front line, covering the entire area from the sensitive Suwalki corridor to the Kaliningrad Peninsula. This is where the eastern flank of the NATO bloc is raising an invisible but extremely tight shield to counter any hostile intentions. However, the emergence of these defensive moves is not a coincidence, but a direct response to the risky military developments taking place right in Belarus, where a scenario of serious escalation is pushing the region into a danger zone. The atmosphere in Minsk has reached a peak of tension as President Alexander Lukashenko held an emergency meeting with Defense Minister Viktor Krenin to make a shocking announcement to the world that Belarus is preparing to enter a state of war. The ironclad orders for partial mobilization and putting the armed forces on the highest combat readiness were immediately turned into real action on the ground, right in the border area adjacent to Kyiv. A new special marching brigade was urgently established. Meanwhile, advanced strategic equipment such as the long-range S-400 air defense system and the heavy Su-30 SM-2 fighter jets are continuously being delivered by Russia to the bases. Logistical facilities, fortification systems, and military road networks along the Ukrainian border are being rapidly expanded at a dizzying pace. However, the ultimate decision-making power in this conflict does not lie in the hands of Lukashenko, but is entirely determined by Vladimir Putin. On the podium during the Victory Day celebration at the Kremlin, the Russian leader, however, delivered a completely contrasting message when he asserted to the media that the war in Ukraine is nearing its end. This calculated contradiction is a classic use of the Moscow Maskirovka doctrine, the Russian military's top-level deception strategy. They send a false signal of peace while also preparing for a new firestorm to distract and paralyze their opponent's judgment. Facing a dangerous and unpredictable situation, the countries on the eastern flank have decided to act first to break the Russian-Belarusian pincer, no longer willing to remain on the defensive. The focus of this strategic counterattack took place at the Bucharest 9 summit held in Bucharest, where President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine and President Gitanas Nausea of Lithuania signed a historic agreement on unmanned technology. This is the first time a NATO country has agreed to establish a full-scale factory production line to manufacture combat drones that have been battle-tested under harsh conditions right on its own territory. This comprehensive contract not only includes the transfer of core technology with the direct involvement of Ukrainian engineers and military experts at factories in Lithuania, but also covers 4 lines of strategic killer drones, long-range attack aerial vehicles, maritime drones for sea assaults, aerial interceptor drones, and low-flying bomber drones. This comes with an extensive cooperation package on missile defense and air defense systems to turn Lithuania into an impregnable fortress. Lithuania's groundbreaking move immediately triggered a defense domino effect spreading throughout the Baltic region. Right at the conference, Latvia also quickly accepted a similar air defense proposal, and delegations of Ukrainian military experts immediately set out for Riga to implement the action plan. The tragic turning point here is that Latvia once provided up to 12,000 drones to Ukraine in the year 2000. But now the situation has reversed as Ukraine is the one transferring invaluable experience in electronic warfare and anti-drone technology to help protect Latvia's own security. Not standing aside, Estonia urgently requested security and aviation experts for support right after incidents of drone rerouting and interference at the border. Meanwhile, Finland is speeding up top-level talks on security, airspace, and long-range drone development. The emergence of this unmanned alliance axis is posing a challenge. This is an unprecedented strategic challenge for the Moscow-Minsk alliance because these cheap but highly effective weapons that have changed the face of the battlefield will be mass-produced right on their doorstep. It doesn't stop at aerial shields. The Baltic countries are carrying out an unprecedented large-scale ground fortification campaign to turn their borders into impenetrable zones for any armored forces. Along the 300-kilometer border with Russia, Estonia is urgently setting up 600 prefabricated concrete shelters that can be rapidly deployed. Along the borders of Lithuania and Latvia, rows of Dragon's Teeth tank barriers are laid out closely. Behind them is a deep anti-tank trench system, dense minefields, and a complex multi-layered network of trenches. The clearest evidence is Lithuania's solid 3-layer defense line, where the first obstacles are set up 5 kilometers deep from the border. It is reinforced with a system of self-detonating bridges and various traps blocking the enemy's advance. And the final stronghold is a solid reserve trench network along with long-range artillery positions. European media have dubbed these fortifications the Ghost Wall, the Maginot Line of the 21st century. However, the objective of this defensive line is purely defensive in nature. Its ultimate purpose is to buy time and completely break the momentum of a blitzkrieg attack. By holding off Russian mechanized infantry in the first few hours, it creates conditions for Allied reinforcements to arrive. To realize that ironclad determination, all 3 Baltic countries have simultaneously raised their defense budgets to record levels in history and reinstated mandatory military conscription. And they are planning arms purchases worth billions of euros from the European Union. This thorough preparation has established a broad defense against expansionist ambitions. In the north, Finland and Sweden maintain a high state of alert, turning the Baltic Sea and the strategic Gotland Island into a no-go zone for the Russian fleet. Along the Black Sea axis, the 2 powers Romania and Turkey are standing side by side, ready to crush any potential threats coming from both rival nations. Costly lessons from the field have proven that cheap kamikaze drone swarms can completely penetrate expensive air defense systems, and that's why the grand project called the European Drone Defense Initiative, led by Poland, is becoming the most decisive answer. By using signal jamming systems, sensors, decoys, specialized counter-drone weapons, and an artificial intelligence early warning system stretching from Finland to Romania, they have turned the Russian leader's attempt to divert attention through the Lukashenko card into a catalyst that pushes the entire region into a phase of full combat readiness. The situation is like a new, resilient, and invulnerable technological iron wall. Looking at the world military map, the most intense focal point right now is the Suwalki corridor. A narrow strip of land is likened to a geopolitical choke point that determines the fate of the entire Baltic region. It is wedged between Russia's Kaliningrad exclave, always ready with Iskander missile launchers, and the advanced S-400 air defense system, and on the other side, the ally Belarus. This strategic choke point has always been a terrifying nightmare in every hypothetical scenario. War simulations have revealed a harsh reality. The Kremlin could choke off and completely seize this corridor in just 3 days. If that scenario happens, the Baltic countries would be immediately and completely isolated by land from the rest of Europe. That dangerous situation has driven a major overhaul. An unprecedented defense structure has been built, creating a comprehensive 3-layer system to protect both airspace and land. Beneath the ground, rows of Dragon's Teeth barriers have been set up to stop the advance of tanks. At low altitude, a technological wall of unmanned aerial vehicles stands ready to intercept any intrusion. And at higher altitudes, massive missile shields are ready to neutralize threats from ballistic missiles. In the dramatic arms race to make the fall of Suwalki Gap an impossibility, Poland has risen powerfully, transforming itself into a new military powerhouse and the true armored spearhead of the alliance. By raising its defense budget to a record level, accounting for up to 5% of its GDP, Warsaw is demonstrating a steely determination unmatched by any other allied nation. Along the eastern border, a $4.3 billion technological shield called the anti-drone system is in place. It was activated through a historic contract between Norway's Kongsberg Group and Poland's PGZ. A Polish defense official does not hide the ambition to turn this planned network into a digital Great Wall, where autonomous drone swarms continuously patrol, integrating with NATO's landmark Eastern campaign. Not stopping there, the European Sky Shield initiative led by Germany, which brings together about 24 countries, is also weaving the Patriot, Iris-T, and Arrow 3 systems into a giant protective net against long-range threats. Poland's ground mechanized power has also been elevated to a new level of destruction by ordering more than 980 Black Panther tanks from South Korea and 366 Abrams tanks from the United States. By the end of this decade, Polish infantry will possess more than 1,100 modern battle tanks, a huge number that surpasses the total number of armored vehicles of the UK, France, Germany, and Italy combined. Poland's transformation is not only happening on the ground, but is also surging in the air, as the first F-35 stealth fighters are preparing to land at air bases, directly dominating the skies over the fiery corridor between Belarus and Kaliningrad. The F-35A is not simply a fifth-generation fighter jet, it also possesses dual nuclear deterrence capabilities. This is the most direct and forceful response to the tactical nuclear arsenal that Russia has deployed in Belarus. At the same time, Prime Minister Donald Tusk has officially announced the National Defense Project, which is distilled from hard-earned lessons on the Ukrainian battlefield and combined with continuous joint combat exercises established with Lithuania at the Suwalki Gap. Right to the north of this critical point, a deeply symbolic historic turning point has emerged. For the first time since World War II, Germany has broken an invisible barrier that lasted 8 decades to permanently deploy a heavy armored brigade named Panzer Brigade 45 Lithuania outside its territory. With a force of up to 5,000 soldiers supported by Leopard 2, A-8 tanks, and Puma armored vehicles, this unit is now approaching the edge of the Suwalki Gap. At the same time, NATO's multinational brigade in Lithuania, commanded by Canada, has also been brought up to its maximum strength, with 2,200 troops turning this area into the most heavily concentrated military zone in response to pressure from the Russian border. As the flames of tension gradually spread southward, Romania and Turkey have become vital pieces in the security architecture of the entire alliance. For Romania, the reality of warfare is no longer theoretical, as the country's airspace has been repeatedly violated by 14 Russian drones. Faced with an imminent threat, Bucharest acted at a breathtaking pace by signing a joint defense production agreement with President Volodymyr Zelensky, while also opening wide the door to access the U.S. anti-drone weapons market. At the Bucharest summit, a comprehensive cooperation roadmap was put on the table, and Romanian Defense Minister Enzo Tealva elevated the level of this confrontation at the European Union Security Council, when he made a strong statement about the need to regroup all Eastern capabilities to counter threats from Russian drones. Romania's concerns are further challenged by the geopolitical specter in the neighboring country of Moldova, where about 1,500 Russian soldiers are still stationed in the separatist region. When Moscow resolutely expelled the Russian commanders by declaring them persona non grata, Moscow immediately issued chilling threats of military intervention. In that tense situation, Romania extended a protective hand to its vulnerable neighbor by providing vital energy and defense aid, taking on the role of a double shield for the entire Southeast European region. If Romania is the shield on land, then on the Black Sea front, Turkey is the chief architect holding the ultimate strategic key. This country has practiced a classic yet shrewd art of balanced diplomacy. On one hand, strengthening Ukraine's military power, while on the other, firmly maintaining its role as a mediator for peace. The clearest symbol of this active neutrality policy is the ghostly presence of Bayraktar TB2 drones, an iconic weapon that became legendary for destroying numerous Russian tanks and helping to sink the Moskva cruiser. But Ankara's contributions did not stop there. Convoys of Kirpi armored vehicles, laser-guided missiles, advanced electronic warfare systems, and Ada-class corvettes have been continuously delivered to Ukraine. By strictly enforcing the Montreux Convention to block the movement of warships through strategic straits, Turkey has choked off Russia's ability to reinforce its Black Sea fleet. At the same time, Under Ankar's leadership, a mine-clearing task force between Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria was established, officially affirming the country's position as an irreplaceable entity, a pivotal axis shaping the entire security structure and lifeline of the Black Sea region. What was revealed at the Sasaha Defense Expo left international military observers astonished. From the grand plan to build a massive drone production center with an output of millions of drones, to the Mozak cruise missile, possessing a destructive range of over 1,000 kilometers, to the lines of kamikaze drones for anti-submarine warfare at sea, and the prototype of the fifth-generation KN fighter jet Turkey is gradually becoming a modern launch pad, a leading power in the field of unmanned equipment and electronic warfare, not only dominating the Black Sea region, but also affirming its position as an irreplaceable pillar throughout the entire NATO alliance. While Ankara locks down the Black Sea pincer in the south, in the opposite direction, the strategic balance in Northern Europe has witnessed a historic reversal. Ironically, it was President Vladimir Putin's own military calculations that became the driving force behind the collapse of the neutrality that this region had built up over many decades. Finland's decision to abandon its long-standing policy of neutrality and officially join NATO immediately extended Russia's land border with the alliance by 1,340 kilometers. Following that, Sweden also stepped through this door, turning the Baltic Sea, the soul of Northern Europe, into an internal lake of NATO overnight. Now, except for Russia's isolated Kaliningrad Peninsula, all the coastal countries are united under the same allied flag. The once famous Baltic fleet of the Kremlin is now surrounded, constrained by Finland to the north, suppressed by Sweden to the west, and locked in by Poland to the south. The chances for this fleet to reach the open ocean, receive reinforcements, or move freely are now more distant than ever. Especially Gotland Island of Sweden, located right in the center of the Baltic Sea and only 300 kilometers from the vital point of Kaliningrad, has become an unsinkable aircraft carrier, a forward fortress that chokes off every move of the Russian Navy. To break this suffocating encirclement, the Kremlin has unleashed a mysterious weapon, a shadow fleet. Uninsured oil tankers, constantly changing their flags and identities, are conducting a sophisticated hybrid war beneath the ocean, targeting undersea internet cables and vital energy pipelines on the seabed. A series of strategic infrastructures, such as the S02 cable line, the Baltic connector pipeline, and the undersea connections between Finland and Estonia, are continuously being targeted for disruption. Putin's playing the Belarus card is a multi-layered, calculated strategy to create a tense front in the north, dispersing Kiev's resources, turning Minsk into a launch base for drones and missiles, while intertwining soft diplomatic messages with intense military pressure. However, this arrow seems to be flying back toward the shooter. With the initial goal of weakening and dividing NATO, the Kremlin has unintentionally become the chief architect fueling the largest arms race in military reconstruction in modern European history. Poland now possesses one of the most powerful armored forces in the world. Germany has broken historical taboos by permanently stationing troops abroad. The Baltic countries have turned their borders into fortified obstacle fields. Turkey is now the main gatekeeper of the Black Sea, and the Baltic Sea has now become a strategic dead end for Russia. In this open game, the greatest tragedy belongs to Alexander Lukashenko as he faces a dilemma, trapped between two fiery pincers. The fragility of his regime, after major political upheavals from massive protests in the past, remains an unhealed wound. If he blindly steps into a full-scale war, his regime risks collapsing from within. But if he refuses, he will face punishment and abandonment from the Kremlin. Moreover, there is a devastating geopolitical variable that MIS has completely overlooked. An attack on Ukraine is no longer just a matter between two countries. Any military advance across the border now means Belarus will have to face Poland and Lithuania directly on its western and northwestern flanks, two resilient NATO members who are already on high alert. It's a destructive gamble that neither Lukashenko nor Putin is crazy enough to stake their political survival on. The situation on the eastern flank of Europe is as taut as a bowstring, where every move could ignite a major war that changes the world order. In your opinion, under the suffocating pressure from the Kremlin, will Lukashenko dare to risk pushing Belarus into an all-out war, crossing the red line with Ukraine and NATO?